Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. The Gaza war is finally over. For the first time in 2 years, there is peace. The ceasefire is holding. There are cheers and tears, also questions about what comes next. Will Hamas lay down arms? Will Netanyahu refrain from another attack? Who will rebuild Gaza and how? Tonight, we break down the deal, the stakes and the road ahead. We'll also look at the politics of the peace summit in Egypt. 20 world leaders, 33 handshakes, lots of viral moments, and why the Indian Prime Minister gave it a miss. Also on the show, how the trade war between the US and China is intensifying, why the LG IPO is being called a blockbuster, why the Pentagon wants to gag the media, what led to the coup in Madagascar, and why there was a French military helicopter in the picture. Why silver has touched record highs, especially in India, and can one route, one fare make flying more accessible for every Indian? Plus, what's the Nobel-winning concept of creative destruction? All this and more coming up. First, as always, the headlines. The French Prime Minister says the controversial pension reform will be suspended until the 2027 presidential election. The reform called for raising the retirement age from 62 to 64. The Prime Minister already faces two no-confidence motions that are likely to be voted on in Parliament on Thursday. Thousands of protesters flood the streets of Belgium's capital, Brussels. They're angry over the government austerity plans. The protests are part of a national strike which has grounded flights and disrupted public transport. Belgium is grappling with a massive budget deficit that violates the rules of the European Union. The International Monetary Fund raises India's growth forecast for 2025-26 to 6.6%, but it has cut the projection to 6.2% for 2026-27. This comes days after the World Bank announced a similar cut. The IMF also predicts that global growth would edge upwards to 3.2% this year. The outlook for next year remains unchanged at 3.1%. Gunmen in northwest Pakistan kill a police officer guarding polio vaccinators. The attack comes amid a nationwide campaign to counter rising cases. Other than Afghanistan, Pakistan is the only country where polio remains an endemic. But in the last decade, militants have killed hundreds of police officers and health workers. Cameroon's opposition candidate claims victory against incumbent President Paul Biya, but the official results for the weekend vote are not expected for 2 weeks. President Biya has been in power for 43 years. The 92-year-old is the world's oldest serving head of state. After 734 days of war, the guns have fallen silent in Gaza. No more fireballs in the night sky, no more missile strikes, no more gunfights. Gazans and Israelis finally have a peace deal. The ceasefire is holding. All the hostages are back home in Israel and hundreds of Palestinians have been freed from Israeli jails. It seemed impossible until recently. It has finally been achieved, and that's a good start. But what if I told you that this was the easy part? Ending the fighting and returning the hostages, this was the easy part. What comes next is uncharted territory. What comes after the peace deal? How will they maintain peace? How will they rebuild Gaza? What will it mean for the key stakeholders in this conflict? For Hamas, for Netanyahu, for the people of Gaza, what's in store for them? That's what we'll discuss tonight. But first, let's look at the situation on the ground. Let's look at what is happening in Gaza. People are returning to urban centers. Thousands are walking up the coastal road to Gaza City. And what will they find there? Most likely destroyed houses and buildings. Aid has also started coming in. On Sunday, some 173 trucks entered Gaza with food and medicines. What they need is 600 trucks every day. But again, it's a start. Over in Israel, families are still waiting eagerly. The 20 living hostages have been freed, but Hamas also held the remains of 28 deceased hostages, 28. 4 bodies were returned yesterday. The remaining 24 are yet to be handed over. This whole process is being handled by the Red Cross, and they say it will take time. It is tough to find the bodies in the rubble of Gaza. Meanwhile, Israeli troops have withdrawn. Let me pull up the map for you. Before the ceasefire, Israel controlled 80% of the Gaza Strip. That's the blue line you see inside the strip. Last week, they began pulling back from the blue line to the yellow line. This leaves around 55% of Gaza in Israeli control. The next withdrawal will come in the next stage of talks, which brings us to the question we set out to address. What happens next? Donald Trump's plan has 20 points. The first step is to create a new governing body. This will be composed of Palestinian technocrats, and guiding them will be a board of peace. A board that includes Donald Trump himself, also former British Prime Minister Tony Blair. They will oversee the rebuilding of Gaza, they will negotiate the Israeli withdrawal, and they will introduce reforms. When the time is right, they will hand over Gaza to the PA. That's the Palestinian Authority, the group that already governs the West Bank. Then comes the question of security. Who will police this war-torn strip? Trump's plan calls for an international stabilization force, sort of like a peacekeeping group. This will include soldiers from Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey. They will police Gaza, these soldiers. After this, Trump's peace plan scales up the ambitions. The plan talks about investments, special economic zones, and tariffs. As of today, we are very far away from all of that, so let's focus on the short term. What happens to Hamas? What will be their role? The plan requires Hamas to surrender, to give up their weapons, and to not rule Gaza again. It says Hamas should give up their political ambitions. That's what the peace plan says. But will they do it? Just look at what happened yesterday. Hamas fighters stood guard as the hostages were freed. They proudly flaunted their guns and gear. And the same thing happened today. Hamas fighters have fanned out across the Gaza Strip. They are reasserting their lost power. So when the time comes, will they surrender their weapons? Will they give up their political ambitions? And if they don't, what will Israel do? Prime Minister Netanyahu had vowed to destroy Hamas. If they retain their weapons, he may return to the battlefield. But if Hamas surrenders, they do have options. Trump's plan grants them amnesty. Their leaders can also leave Gaza if they wish to. On the other side, Netanyahu also faces a difficult test. Israel is slated to hold elections in October next year. If the peace holds, maybe sooner. Elections may come sooner. And the results may not favor Netanyahu. The Israeli parliament, or the Knesset, has 120 seats. If polls are held today, the opposition would win 59 seats, Netanyahu's bloc would win 51 seats, and the Arab parties could get 10. You need 61 seats to form the government. Chances are Netanyahu will be ousted if elections are held today. And that's just the start of his problems. Netanyahu is also facing corruption allegations in court. Until now, he used the war and his office to fight them. Without those, he faces an uncertain future. And Donald Trump hinted at that yesterday. He asked the Israeli president to pardon Netanyahu.
Hey, I have an idea. Mr. President, why don't you give him a pardon? Give him a pardon. Come on.
And what about the people of Gaza? They will be looking forward to living without fear. But as they say, peace is not the absence of war. It must also bring prosperity, stability, and that requires rebuilding Gaza. Around 83% of all buildings in Gaza have been destroyed, 83%. The war has left 55 million tons of rubble. That is 13 times the Pyramid of Giza. All that rubble will have to be removed first. Urban centers will have to be swept for bombs, and finally it must be rebuilt. And all of it will cost around $70 billion, $70 billion. The United Nations says it is confident that Arab and Western countries will step up. They may be able to rebuild concrete structures. But don't forget the emotional and human toll. Around 68,000 Gazans have been killed in the last 2 years. Hundreds of families have been torn apart. For them, a ceasefire will not bring normalcy. They will need time and care. And looming large over all these concerns is that of statehood, the question of creating a Palestinian state. This is presented as the end game in Trump's plan. But Trump himself is unsure about it. Listen to his comments yesterday.
I'm talking about rebuilding Gaza. I'm not talking about single state or double state or two-state. We're talking about the rebuilding of Gaza.
What's the road ahead for governing
Well,
Gaza?
we'll have to see. I mean, a lot of people like the one-state solution. Some people like the two-state solution. So we'll have to see. I haven't commented on that.
Netanyahu feels the same. He has promised to fight the two-state solution. He says it would be like rewarding Hamas. Of course, the Arab countries feel differently. They know they have momentum on their side. They're using that momentum to push for a Palestinian state.
I reaffirm our support and aspiration for the implementation of this plan, creating the political horizon necessary for the implementation of the two-state solution, as it is the only way to achieve the legitimate aspirations of the Palestinian and Israeli people to end the conflict and live in peace.
So which way will things go? That could very well depend on Trump. Because these talks could break down at any stage, and if they do, Israel will want to return to the battlefield. Only Trump can stop that from happening. Same on the other side. Trump has considerable clout with the allies of Hamas. I'm talking about the likes of Qatar, Turkey and Egypt. If they can pile on the pressure, Hamas may relent. These are conversations that will likely happen in the shadows, away from cameras, clicks and pageantry. Very different from what we saw yesterday. "33 handshakes. If diplomacy were a contact sport, Donald Trump would be its undisputed showman. No one shakes hands quite like the US president. Every grip, every pull, every smirk, it is theater. It makes you wonder, is he negotiating peace or trying to win a duel? And at Sharm el-Sheikh, things were no different. Sharm el-Sheikh is a small Red Sea resort town in Egypt. Yesterday, it turned into the capital of global diplomacy. More than 20 world leaders gathered for the Gaza Peace Summit. Donald Trump co-chaired it with Egypt. This was a summit to end the Gaza war, at least that was the goal, but it looked more like a global photo op. The massive backdrop read, "Peace in the Middle East" in gold letters. The stage was framed by flags and cameras. Donald Trump declared victory, the crowd applauded, and the leaders smiled.
United Kingdom. Where's United Kingdom? Where's our friend? Come here. Is everything going good?
Very good.
It's very nice that you're here. These people all came in like 20-minute notice, and I think it's fantastic. And we have so many others, and just so many others.
Before any talks began, came the main act, handshake diplomacy. Trump stood before the giant peace sign, waiting like a showman on stage. One by one, world leaders walked in, they shook hands, Trump made a comment or two, and then on to the next. But a few moments went viral, like this one, the Trump-Macron handshake duel part 3. The French President Macron approached, all smiles. They clasped hands and did not let go. The handshake continued for 27 seconds. Trump pulled Macron closer. Macron tightened the grip. Both smiled for the cameras, even as their knuckles turned white. Then there was Mark Carney. He's the Prime Minister of Canada. In the past, Trump has called him governor. But yesterday, he had a new title for Mark Carney. Trump called him the President of Canada.
You have Canada. It's so great to have, in fact, the president called and he wanted to know if it's worthwhile. He knew exactly what it was. He knew the importance. Where's Canada, by the way? Where are you? Where are you? Is he going back?
No, I'll go back. I'm glad you upgraded me to president.
Oh, did I say?
Great stuff. It's good. I started.
He said he'd say that.
Then there was Giorgia Meloni, the Prime Minister of Italy. She was the only woman on stage, and that made her the unintentional protagonist. First, there was an exchange with the Turkish president. He said she looks great, but he asked her to stop smoking.
Everything okay?
Her şey yolunda.
İyi gördüm.
Oh, you look great.
Oh, thank you. Ama sigarayı bıraktırmam lazım.
But I have to make you stop smoking somehow.
I know. I don't want to kill somebody. Yeah.
And then it was Trump's turn. He could have said a lot of things about Meloni. After all, she is Italy's first prime minister, first female prime minister, and they have ideological similarities. But this is what Trump chose to call her: a beautiful young woman.
Italy, we have a woman, a young woman who's, I'm not allowed to say it because usually it's the end of your political career if you say it. She's a beautiful young woman. Now, if you use the word beautiful in the United States about a woman, that's the end of your political career, but I'll take my chances. Where is she? There she is. You don't mind being called beautiful, right? Because you are. Thank you very much for coming. We appreciate it. She wanted to be here, and she's incredible, and they really respect her in Italy. She's a very successful politician.
The room laughed, but the internet did not, and rightfully so. Because when you're the only female leader in a room full of men, the bar is higher for you, and the jokes, they just land lower. But it wasn't as bad as the one with the UAE official. Trump pointed at him and said this. By the time the family photograph was taken, Trump had shaken hands with 33 world leaders, some soft and deferential, others firm and almost comically competitive. Every interaction was a glimpse into Trump's worldview, transactional and theatrical. But for once, it was not Trump who was asking for favors. Indonesia's president had a special request for him.
In the region, can you meet Eric? We look for better place. Yeah, all of them. Thank you.
Now, you may wonder, what about the peace summit? Well, that happened too. Trump arrived in Sharm el-Sheikh from Israel. Israel and Hamas had already exchanged hostages and prisoners. 20 Israeli captives were freed by Hamas. Nearly 2,000 Palestinians were released by Israel. There were celebrations in West Asia. It was undeniably a major moment. At Sharm el-Sheikh, the US president signed the Trump Declaration. It promises a ceasefire, the demilitarization of Gaza, amnesty for Hamas members willing to lay down arms, and a transitional Palestinian committee.
We're going to be signing a document that's going to spell out a lot of rules and regulations and lots of other things, and it's very comprehensive, but We've already signed documents in the Middle East and having to do with Israel and Hamas and just about everything else, and it's really working out incredibly well.
But there was a catch. Neither Israel nor Hamas attended the summit. Yesterday, Netanyahu was invited to attend the summit by Trump and the Egyptian president. At first, reports said that he had agreed, but then came a statement from the Israeli Prime Minister's office. Netanyahu was not going to Sharm el-Sheikh. The official reason was a Jewish holiday, but again, reports suggest the real reason was Turkish President Erdogan. Apparently, he dialed the Egyptian president and refused to land if Netanyahu was there. So officials scrambled to keep the Israeli leader away. And the declaration was big on adjectives but short of details. There's no mention of Palestinian statehood, no clear mechanism for reconstruction, no plan for what happens when the ceasefire turns fragile. So it seems like a phase one of a very long process, and yet the big questions remain unanswered, like who would govern Gaza? Would Hamas disarm? Would Israel withdraw? There are no answers to these questions.
Thank you very much, everybody. This is a tremendous day for the world. It's a tremendous day for the Middle East. And you can see that this is probably the greatest assemblage of countries in terms of wealth and power maybe ever assembled. And it's just an honor to be a part of it.
So 33 handshakes later, uncertainty still looms. But at least the spotlight is on Trump. Maybe that's the real lesson of his handshake diplomacy, where sometimes the grip matters more than the agreement. And at Sharm el-Sheikh, the world got both, a peace summit and a show. So that's what happened in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. More than a dozen world leaders were there in attendance. Even the FIFA chief was there for some weird reason. But missing from the scene was India's Prime Minister. Prime Minister Modi did get an invite. Reports say both Donald Trump and the Egyptian president invited him, but he chose not to attend. Instead, India was represented by Kirti Vardhan Singh. He is the Minister of State for External Affairs, sort of like the junior foreign minister. So naturally, everyone is asking why. Why did Prime Minister Modi skip this summit? After all, India has close ties with Israel and the Arab world. It is also a major power on the world stage. So why did the Indian Prime Minister not attend the peace summit? Well, we can think of three reasons. For starters, the presence of Pakistan. Their Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif was also in Egypt. In fact, he was standing right behind Trump. Had Prime Minister Modi gone, it would have created an awkward situation. And look at what Trump did yesterday. First, he claimed credit for ending the India-Pakistan conflict yet again. And then he said that India and Pakistan would live in peace. After that, he turned around to face Shehbaz Sharif, and the Pakistani Prime Minister gave him a sheepish nod. Take a look.
I think that Pakistan and India are going to live very nicely together. Do you want to say what you said to me the other day? Come, would you like to say what you said the other day? I think it was so nice.
Well, that was hard enough to watch. Now imagine if Prime Minister Modi was actually there. Trump would have pulled the same tactic with him, basically forced him into an uncomfortable public situation, because that's his brand of diplomacy. It's all about catching leaders off guard in public. That could be the first reason. Secondly, look at the style of the summit. It did not look like a multilateral peace gathering. It looked like Donald Trump was holding court, and the guest list reflects that. You had America's European NATO allies, you had America's Arab allies, you also had America's Asian allies. All of them had the same agenda, to curry favor with the US president. You just heard his exchange with the Indonesian leader. It was more about hyping up Trump than peace. And India does not do that. And finally, the third reason, this was a preliminary agreement at best, that too without the two main players present. Israel's Prime Minister was not in Egypt, nor was any leader from Hamas. Maybe that is why the Indian Prime Minister did not attend. Whatever the reason, do not mistake it for disinterest. India has been consistently supporting the peace effort. Prime Minister Modi backed it the moment Trump announced it. Even yesterday, Prime Minister Modi was following the events. Let me quote his statements. We welcome the release of all hostages after 2 years of captivity. Their freedom stands as a tribute to the courage of their families, the unwavering peace efforts of President Trump, and the strong resolve of Prime Minister Netanyahu. Prime Minister Modi also posted the same message in Hebrew. So clearly, he is interested in the same end goal, to bring peace to West Asia. The divergence lies in the process and style. Just consider the war in Ukraine. India has relayed messages between Kiev and Moscow. Prime Minister Modi has nudged Putin to protect Ukrainian children. He told Russia this is not an era for war. The idea was to engage in quiet but powerful diplomacy. But Trump's style is the opposite. It is personal, it is public, it is dramatic. Also, Trump is not exactly popular in India anymore. His tariffs have turned the Indian public against him. As things stand, both sides have resumed trade talks, but there is no clarity on a deal yet. Maybe Prime Minister Modi did not want to meet amid all this uncertainty. Maybe he wants to strike a deal first. Whatever the reason, we can say one thing for sure: the decision to skip it was the right one. India does not need to attend a summit to burnish its peace and leadership credentials.
Just a response to something that they did, and really aim it at us. They aimed it at the whole world, the whole world.
China has a Donald Trump problem. The world's second largest economy cannot read the White House. In public, President Trump says a deal with China is still possible. Listen to this first.
I think we're going to be fine with China. Look, I have a great relationship with President Xi. He's a very tough man. He's a very smart man. He's a great leader for their country. He's a great leader. And I have a great relationship with him. I think we'll get it set.
That's what Trump says, but his actions tell a different story. For months, the US and China have been negotiating, but the talks are going nowhere. The trade war is getting harder to untangle, and both sides are escalating tensions. As a result, risks for the global economy are rising. And today, a new front has opened up. The US and China have introduced new port fees. These are extra charges on incoming ships. They're imposed as soon as goods arrive on the shore. So American ports will tax Chinese vessels, and Chinese ports will do the same to American ships. Plus, these fees are not small. Exporters could face millions in extra costs if they're moving large orders. For many, the price tag may be prohibitive. It could make some businesses unviable, and Beijing is adding to the pressure because it is not stopping at port fees. China's market regulator has launched an anti-monopoly probe. They're targeting US tech giant Qualcomm. Qualcomm is being investigated over a company acquisition. And this is not a one-off move. This probe is part of a wider Chinese strategy. Last week, Beijing announced a series of economic measures. It tightened export rules for rare earths. These are minerals needed to build modern gadgets. China has a monopoly on their supply, and it is holding back rare earth supplies. China also refuses to share technology to process rare earths. And it has cut back on buying soybean from the US. Like I said, it's a series of measures they've introduced. Trump responded to this in typical fashion. He threatened another 100% tariffs on China. In fact, higher tariffs are already kicking in on some imports. Stuff like timber, kitchen cabinets, and upholstered furniture. America imports them in large quantities from China, and these goods now face higher taxes. So the trade war is clearly escalating. It is also spilling over. It has hit different parts of the economy in both countries, the US and China. And in this backdrop, Trump is threatening more tariffs. At the same time, his team says he will meet the Chinese president later this month.
Yes, that's the signal that the president has given. He did say in his in his truth post, that he could always pull it forward, but the idea is to give them time to meet and talk this out.
Trump and Xi are expected to meet on the 29th of October in South Korea. They will be attending the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum. So before the meeting, Trump could be resorting to his usual tactics, raising the stakes and building leverage to force a better deal. That is how he operates. But China is proving to be a tough opponent. Despite the tariffs, China's export engine is holding firm. In September, Chinese exports rose by over 8%. That is the fastest growth in 6 months. Total exports crossed $320 billion. $320 billion. How did China pull it off? They're losing ground in the US. China's shipments to the US are shrinking. They dropped by 27% last month. But Beijing managed to adapt. It managed to offset the losses from the US market and increased exports to other regions, especially to Europe. Now look at China's total exports to non-US markets. They've grown by almost 15% last month. That's the fastest pace since March 2023. At the same time, China is weaponizing its supplies. The tariffs and restrictions designed to hurt the US are also being applied to Europe. I'll give you an example. The curbs on rare earth supplies. China introduced them for the US, but it imposed them on European companies as well. And this has raised an alarm in Brussels. The Danish foreign minister is calling for action. He said, and I quote, "We should have a tough response." Denmark currently holds the EU's rotating presidency. European leaders are concerned. They fear the disruption from the US-China trade war could spread. It could impact the wider global economy. Europe is already caught in the crossfire, and if Trump and Xi fail to break the deadlock, the global economy is in for greater disruption. Now let's talk about the Indian stock market. Something big is happening here. Money is flowing in at record levels and companies are rushing to be part of it. Big names, household brands and global giants, they all want a slice of India's financial energy. And they're doing it through something called the IPO. That's Initial Public Offering, IPO. It is when a company sells its shares to the public for the first time, the initial offering. Until that moment, the company is private. After it goes public, after it sells its shares, anyone, even small investors, can own a part of the company. The part that these investors own is called a share. If you buy a share, you own a small part of that company. This is how companies raise money to expand, and this is how investors become part of a company's future. Today, India is embracing this model like never before, and the numbers prove it. In just 9 months of this year, in the first 9 months of the year 2025, 79 companies have gone public in India, meaning 79 companies have launched an IPO this year. Together, they have raised $11.5 billion. And by the end of this year, this number could cross $20 billion. And October is shaping up to be the biggest month of all. IPOs worth more than $5 billion are hitting the market this month alone. In October, $5 billion. And two names have grabbed everyone's attention, Tata Capital and LG Electronics India. Tata Capital raised $1.7 billion. It is the largest IPO in India this year. And LG has emerged as a star of the show. It's India's second biggest appliance maker. Its public debut proved just how much investors believe in its future. The LG IPO was worth $1.3 billion and the demand was nothing short of extraordinary. Investors placed bids worth a staggering $50 billion. And when trading began today, LG stock took off. It surged by more than 50% on the first day. The company's market value hit over $13 billion, which is more than its parent company in South Korea. And it became the most successful IPO since 2021. The company's chairman said it was a defining moment in their history. Listen in.
Today's IPO is not just a financial milestone. It's a defining moment in our journey to become truly national company in India. Through our products and technologies, we will continue to bring convenience, innovation, and the joy to everyday life, strengthening our position as the country's most trusted home appliance brand.
That message shows what this IPO really means. It's not just a big stock market debut, it's a sign of how global companies now see India. For years, India was mainly a consumer market. Today, it is a center of capital. It's a place where companies don't just sell products, but also raise billions to build their future. Again, the numbers prove it. The scale of demand is huge, the speed of subscription is rapid, and the size of those deals is proof that investors trust India's growth story. But what explains this trend? Well, three things. One, the growing domestic investors. Millions of Indians now invest in the stock market. Some buy shares directly, others invest through mutual funds. Domestic investors have put over $63 billion into the market this year. This keeps money moving into IPOs even when foreign investors pull back. The second reason is India's economic growth. India is the fastest or one of the fastest growing major economies in the world. Strong domestic demand is driving that growth. And a young workforce is fueling it further. Companies need money to expand here. They need funds to build factories. They need capital to create jobs, and they need investment to scale operations. Investors want to be part of that story. Then we have strong profits and tax cuts. They're also boosting confidence. The third reason is the rising policy support. Regulators have made it easier for big companies to go public in India. Even the Reserve Bank of India, RBI, India's central bank, has relaxed rules for IPO investors. So all of this has created the perfect environment for new listings. And the results are clear. India is now the fourth busiest IPO market in the world. It could even surpass last year's record of $21 billion, and the pipeline is still full. Pine Labs, ICICI Prudential AMC, Lenskart, and PhonePe. These companies are the next in line for a debut. So LG's IPO is not just a story of one company's success. It is a story of Indian markets, of how far they've come and how they're being powered by a fast-growing economy. The US military has fought many wars, in the trenches of World War II, in the wastelands of Iraq and Afghanistan, and in the skies over West Asia. Now the US military leadership is fighting a new war against journalists. The Pentagon has updated its media rules. The Pentagon is their defense ministry, or war ministry as they now call it. They've introduced new rules. And these rules were announced by US Secretary of War Pete Hegseth. The rules require journalists to sign a pledge. They must promise to never publish unauthorized information. Even unclassified, unauthorized information, they should not publish it. Only then will the journalists get credentials. Only then will they get access. Basically, the Pentagon will tell you what to publish. So no leaks, no source-based information, no investigation. The media can only report what the Pentagon tells them to report, what it authorizes. And you can't ignore the irony here, because Pete Hegseth himself was in the news media. He hosted a talk show on Fox News. But now he's cracking down on his colleagues. They must sign his pledge by today. If not, they will have to surrender their press credentials, meaning they will lose access to the Pentagon. But news outlets are pushing back. The Washington Post has refused to accept the new rules. So has the New York Times, CNN, The Atlantic, The Guardian, Reuters, The Associated Press, NPR. Most big outlets have refused to sign it. Trump's team may not care about these outlets. They already call them fake news. But here's the worrying part. Even right-wing outlets have refused to sign, like the Washington Times and Newsmax. These outlets are known to back Trump consistently. Yet they're not signing the pledge. And the Pentagon is not backing down. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth is mocking the journalists. Here's what he said, and I'm quoting. Here's the department's memo for dummies. Press no longer roams free. Press must wear visible badge. Credentialed press no longer permitted to solicit criminal acts. These rules are also part of the new guidelines, but Hegseth did not mention the most controversial one, the one regarding the pledge. And this move is not an isolated one. It is part of Donald Trump's bid to reshape the Pentagon, starting with nomenclature. Like I said, the Pentagon is not the Department of Defense anymore, it is the Department of War. Similarly, Pete Hegseth is not the Secretary of Defense. He is the Secretary of War. Trump says he wants to inculcate a warrior culture in the US military. No more woke ideas or diversity. He wants to focus on lethality. And these media rules should be seen in that context as a bid to control the military's narrative. Remember, the White House had a really bad experience in the month of March. Security officials accidentally added a journalist to their Signal chat. Signal, as you would know, is a messenger app. Think of it as a secure, super encrypted WhatsApp. In March, officials added a journalist to one such Signal chat, and they ended up sharing war plans with him on that chat. Plans on launching military strikes at the Houthis of Yemen. And when the news came out, it was quite embarrassing, of course, and Pete Hegseth himself came under a lot of fire. Maybe this is why he's ensuring that there is never a repeat. Having said that, there is a strategic argument too. The Pentagon is famous for its leaks. If you follow US outlets, you will know this. Some reports often reveal highly sensitive information that could be weaponized. So Trump supporters say the new rules are necessary. They say it will plug the Pentagon's leaks. I'm afraid that won't cut it. If you fear leaks, look within your organization. Do not blame journalists if your officials can't hold information. Plus, the stakeholders are unhappy, all of them. The Pentagon press corps has condemned the rules. Former Pentagon officials have criticized them. Anonymous serving officials have questioned them. So who exactly are these rules serving? Also, where are the guardians of a free press? Trump has launched repeated attacks on the media. He has sued multiple outlets. He has weaponized regulators. He has called for taking off late-night hosts off air. Yet, rights bodies are silent. I guess press freedom only matters outside the first world. Or maybe such problems are unimaginable in the US. Either way, this should be a huge red flag because the United States military is the most powerful in the world. It is deployed across dozens of countries. It also has a history of committing abuses and crimes. If anything, the US military needs more media scrutiny, not less. Our next story is from Madagascar. It is an island nation in the Indian Ocean. It is famous for its wildlife and natural beauty. But today it is making headlines for a very different reason. A political storm is tearing through the nation. Weeks of protests have swept the streets. Demonstrators are demanding an end to poverty, corruption, and years of failed promises. The movement is being led by Gen Z, and it mirrors similar uprisings seen in Nepal last month. The demand is clear. President Andry Rajoelina must resign. The pressure is growing by the day. Earlier today, the parliament voted to impeach President Rajoelina. And later, an elite military unit announced that it had taken over power. The president has fled, and the future of the island nation now hangs in the balance. Here's our report.
Madagascar is on edge. Its streets are full. Its parliament has moved to impeach the president. And the future of one of Africa's poorest nations now hangs in the balance. What began as frustration over failing power grids and empty taps has spiralled into a nationwide rebellion. The island nation is now in the midst of its worst political crisis in more than a decade. At the heart of this anger is a simple truth. Daily life has become unbearable. 3/4 of Malagasys live below the poverty line. Jobs are scarce. Food prices are rising. And water and electricity, basic services, have become luxuries. For many, it's not just about one government failing. It's about a system that has failed generation after generation. The protests began in September as marches over water and power shortages. But they have now turned into a political movement led by the country's youth. They call themselves Gen Z Madagascar. They say they want a government that listens, and they demand that President Andry Rajoelina resign. Their frustration is not new. Since gaining independence from France in 1960, Madagascar has endured repeated coups, contested elections and political paralysis. But this time, the anger feels different. The streets are younger, the movement is louder, and the country's power structures are beginning to fracture. In a dramatic turn of events, an elite military unit in Madagascar also switched sides. It refused orders to fire on the demonstrators. It marched along with them, and it demanded the government step down. The pressure quickly moved from the streets to the halls of power. Earlier today, Madagascar's parliament voted to impeach the president. Minutes later, the elite CAPSAT military unit announced it had taken over power. This marks a turning point. With power slipping from his hands, President Rajoelina has fled the country. He said there were attempts on his life, and he insisted there was a plot to remove him by force.
There have been real plans since September 25th for a coup, an assassination attempt against me.
But protesters say this is not about one man. It's about reclaiming their country. It's about a new future. And it is about breaking free from foreign influence, especially its former colonizer France. Rajoelina, who also holds French citizenship, has faced criticism over his ties to Paris. Critics say France still wields significant influence over the country's politics. Some even accuse it of helping Rajoelina flee. Paris has not yet commented on this accusation. It has instead expressed concerns over the crisis.
I think it is very important that the constitutional order, institutional continuity be preserved in Madagascar, because the stability of the country and the interests of the population are at stake. It just must not be taken over by military factions or foreign interference.
But calls for stability have done little to change the situation. The Madagascar government's attempts to calm the anger have failed. The protesters are still on the streets, and the army is now stepping in. The nation's future is uncertain. What happens next will decide more than who leads Madagascar.
Now let's talk about silver, the shiny, precious metal. If you're in the market for silver, be prepared to pay more because prices are on fire. Globally, silver has touched record highs. It is trading at $52.5 for an ounce. 1 ounce is around 30 grams and $52 is around 4,500 Indian rupees. So 1 kilo of silver will cost you almost 150,000 rupees, 1,50,000 rupees. And in India, it's even more expensive because here traders are charging a premium, a markup of 10%. So jewelers are struggling, manufacturers are scrambling to secure supplies, and investors, well, they are rushing in, hoping to ride the momentum behind the metal. But what is driving this bull run of silver? A shortage. Silver is in short supply worldwide. Production cannot keep up with demand. And why is that? Because silver cannot simply be extracted. It is a byproduct. It comes from mining other metals like zinc, copper, and lead. So traders cannot simply ramp up silver production. At the same time, the demand keeps climbing up. More industries now need silver, especially to make electronic products, things like solar panels and electronics. Investors too are buying more silver. In fact, look at this headline. This is about a mutual fund which invests in silver, the Tata Silver ETF Fund of Funds. It has suspended fresh investment in the fund, so new investors cannot enter. No new lump sum investments, no new SIPs. And SIP is the most common way to invest in mutual funds. It stands for Systematic Investment Plan, SIP. Once you sign up for an SIP, every week or every month, whatever you've signed up for, the same amount is deducted from your account. It is invested in your name. Hence the term Systematic Investment Plan. Now, if you have an existing SIP in the silver fund, it will continue, but you cannot make a new investment. And the reason remains the same. The surge in silver prices. Fund managers are unable to find the right price. You see, in such mutual funds, managers have to back investor money with real physical silver. But right now, the metal is either unavailable or just too expensive. So they have suspended new investments. And it will remain suspended until the demand cools down. Like I said, this is a global shortage. But India in particular is facing the brunt of it because India imports more than 80% of its silver. And due to the current shortage, imports have dropped significantly. In the first 8 months of 2025, silver imports dropped by 42%. So expect the prices to remain high until supply catches up with demand. And that may take some time. Because even the world's biggest financial centers are seeing silver supplies dry up. Traders are airlifting silver from New York to London, which is a rare and costly move. Usually traders do this for gold. But now silver shipments are being airlifted because there isn't enough in the global markets. So even if Indian suppliers are willing to pay a premium, they might struggle to source more. And the timing couldn't have been worse. The festive season is underway here in India. This is usually the time when people buy precious metals in large numbers. These purchases are considered auspicious. But given the shortage, jewelers are cutting back on supply. There's also a shortage of festive coins and bars. These are often exchanged as gifts during festivals. Reports say dealers are defaulting on e-commerce platforms like Amazon. So the obvious question is, where does silver go from here? Will the prices keep rising? Unless global supply improves or the demand slows down, prices could keep rising. And for India, the situation is delicate. Silver imports are low, the demand is high, the festive season is adding pressure. So for those who already have some silver, it is best to hold on to it. And for those who are planning to buy, the shine is slipping out of reach. Like I said, the festival season is here in India, and if you've ever tried booking a flight this time of the year, you know how it goes. One day a ticket looks affordable, the next day it is twice the price, and if you wait too long, it's often through the roof. For many in India, these soaring fares have been a challenge. But this year, that story might finally change. The government has launched a new initiative. It is called One Route, One Fare. One route, one fare. It promises one price for every passenger, whether you book months in advance or just before takeoff. It's a bold experiment by Alliance Air, the government's own regional airline. And if it works, it could change how millions of Indians travel. Our next report explains.
Imagine this. You check a flight today, the price looks fine. You check again tomorrow, it has doubled. You wait till the day you actually want to travel, and it's suddenly 3 times higher. It's a familiar story for air passengers. And this is exactly what the Indian government now wants to change. This week, Alliance Air, a government-owned airline, launched a new policy. It's called Fare Se Fursat, meaning relief from fare volatility. Under this scheme, ticket prices will stay the same. It won't matter when you book. A month before or a day before, the fare will not change. It even stays fixed for last-minute bookings, and the timing couldn't be more relevant. Festival season is here in India. Airfares usually surge, and last-minute tickets become unaffordable for millions of travelers. This new initiative aims to change exactly that. The pilot project started on Monday. It runs until December 31st. Only selected routes are part of this first phase. Officials say they will monitor passenger response. If it is positive, the plan could expand to more routes. The initiative is also being called One Route, One Fare. Each route will have one fixed price. No dynamic pricing, no hidden spikes, no last-minute surprises. But why is the government doing this? Because most of India's aviation market uses dynamic pricing. Fares change with demand, season, and competition. That helps airlines make more money, but it frustrates passengers. The new plan aims to bring clarity, stability, and transparency to airfares, and it wants to make flying more predictable and affordable. The focus is on Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities. Alliance Air operates most of its routes there. It does this under the government's Ude Desh Ka Aam Nagrik scheme, which means let the common citizens of the country fly. The goal of this scheme is to connect smaller cities to the national network and make flying more accessible. Alliance Air is well suited for that role. Its aircraft can land at small airports. They can link remote towns to larger cities. But despite this strategic role, Alliance Air remains a relatively small player. Its domestic market share is just 0.3%. The fixed fare model could help improve this number. Besides, this initiative is also about first-time flyers. For many, price uncertainty stops them from choosing air travel. A fixed fare removes that barrier. It makes planning simpler. India's Civil Aviation Minister says the aim is to democratize aviation. He wants it to be accessible for the middle class, lower middle class, and neo-middle class. The government has already been working on affordability at airports. It has launched cafes that are offering tea, coffee, and snacks at bare minimum rates. The idea is to make every part of the flying experience more dignified. The next few months will decide the future of this experiment. But for now, it marks a significant shift in how India thinks about air travel.
Every October, the Nobel Committee picks a few people who, in their words, helped understand the world better. This year, the prize for economics went to a trio, Joel McCour, Philippe Aghion, and Peter Hewitt. The three of them built on an idea that almost sounds like an oxymoron: creative destruction. They won for explaining how new technologies drive long-term economic growth, how innovation through creative destruction keeps economies moving forward. It may sound like a boring concept, something that you missed in your first period of economics class, but the idea actually is quite simple. And in fact, it is ancient. Take Hindu mythology, for example. Lord Shiv dances the Tandav. It's a cosmic performance where worlds are created and destroyed in perfect rhythm. To build the new, he must dismantle the old. That, in its essence, is creative destruction. Destroy the old, build the new. So the idea has existed forever. In fact, even Karl Marx noticed it. He mentioned it in the Communist Manifesto. Marx said that capitalism constantly revolutionizes itself. What does that mean? It means that capitalism builds new ways of production by destroying the old ones. Machines replaced artisans, factories replaced workshops, computers replaced secretaries, and so on and so forth. But the term itself came up only in the 1940s. It was popularized by this man, Austrian economist Joseph Schumpeter. He called it capitalism's perennial gale. I'll give you a real-world example. Imagine holding a Nokia 3310, the indestructible brick phone from the 2000s. It was everywhere. Everyone loved it. And then one day, Apple released the iPhone. Suddenly, Nokia was not cool anymore. Its factories slowed. Its workers were laid off. At the same time, smartphones opened up entirely new industries. The likes of app design, digital photography, cloud computing. This is creative destruction. Economists Aghion and Howitt turned this idea into a model back in 1992. The economy, they said, is like a ladder. Each new invention is a step up. McCour gave this idea further depth. He showed how human progress is always dependent on one thing: keeping that ladder moving. And there are many such examples. The steam engine replaced horse carts. The internet nearly killed the newspaper. Artificial intelligence might one day take your job. It may feel very chaotic at first, but this destruction is not chaos for the sake of chaos. It clears the space for something new. At its heart, creative destruction is a very human idea. Basically, to move forward, we must let go. And while this Nobel Prize was about economics, the idea it celebrated is central to life. We all experience creative destruction. Countries overthrow their leaders, civilizations reinvent themselves. Each innovation, each event displaces something old, and in the process, you must strike a balance, because too little change and economies stagnate, too much change and resources are wasted. Growth is achieved when there's a balance between competition and stability. And this idea is more relevant today than ever before. Our world is going through a churn. The biggest disruptor is artificial intelligence. Chatbots are doing everything from writing essays to giving therapy. Jobs are at risk. One report says AI could wipe off half of all entry-level white-collar jobs in the US. Worldwide, 40% of all roles could be at risk. Companies are prioritizing AI over new hires. It may feel like a destructive churn. But this chaos or destruction is not the end. Just like Shiv's Tandav, AI and innovation are part of a rhythm. Some jobs will vanish, some industries will collapse, but new ones will emerge. The key is how we manage this churn. We need safety nets, we need retraining and systems that help people transition. Creative destruction can be scary, but it is also the engine of progress. And those who embrace it are the ones who will thrive. So Trump brokered peace in West Asia, and the world rushed to give him credit. Time magazine was quick to jump in. The cover read, "His triumph," with a picture of Trump. But the US president did not care about the article at all. All he saw was his hair, and he did not like it one bit. In fact, he ran straight to Truth Social to air his hair grievances. He called it, and I'm quoting, "a super bad picture that deserves to be called out, because if there's one thing Trump loves more than a deal, it is his hair." Take a look.
I like to have, I have this gorgeous head of hair. In my case, I like to take a nice shower to take care of my beautiful hair. I have to stand under the shower for 15 minutes till it gets wet. It comes out drip, drip, drip. Oh, I'm looking at my hair up there. Let's see. Oh, I don't like it. I don't like it. Excuse me, I'm going to recomb my hair. Do you mind? I see the woman with the wild hair. Good solid head of hair she's got. There's no kidding. There's no games with her hair. I'm having a bad hair day. This is not good. I have to have a bad hair day in front of Virginia? I'm studying my hair. It looks not so good today. It's not a good hair day, but who cares? Not a good hair day for me.
Now it's time for Vantage shots, images that tell the story. SpaceX launches another Starship rocket to test its reusable design. Dinosaur footprints from over 166 million years ago found in a British quarry. And a flying car takes to the skies over Dubai. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1964, Martin Luther King Jr. won the Nobel Peace Prize. He was awarded for his nonviolent resistance to racial prejudice in America. At that time, the 35-year-old civil rights activist was the youngest person ever to receive the award. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.